Felix here today. Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. I'm finally back up on the ground floor of the archive, and my cold is starting to get better. It's been a long stretch in the archive working with the older, more esoteric collections, but now I'm finally back on the ground floor. I spent the day reclassifying some pre-1900 material, and let me tell you, it's not just dusty old books. Some of them items have an energy, a lingering weight that makes you feel like you're never quite alone. I can't help but wonder if being around them for so long has left a mark on me. Well, I guess we'll find out one way or another. But today, I am feeling better, and I want to thank you for joining me once again as we dive into the strange and the mysterious. These stories have a way of pulling you in like a shadow you can't shake. They remind us of a history that refuses to fade, the echoes that still linger. Today, I want to share a story from my archive that I was reclassifying this week. It's one of those tales that sends a chill down your spine even after all these years, and it has a link to the great Christopher Wren and his beautiful churches. I'm going to call this one the Wren Churches. The medieval churches of London have a long reach. Though they were destroyed in the Great Fire of 1666, their after images still linger. Some exist as small City of London gardens, others live on the walls of churches that Christopher Wren built after the fire, his elegant designs forced to fit the odd, ancient foundations of their predecessors. This combination gives Wren churches their distinctive character. These churches faced destruction once again during the Blitz, and while some were rebuilt, others became gardens. Still, their stone-carved grandeur remains, even amid the modern bustle of the city. There's something comforting about stepping into the calm of a centuries-old church from the wind-blown streets of Moorgate or Bishopsgate. But you need to be careful before you step inside. The church I want to tell you about isn't easy to find. It's not on any map, and there's no plaque to mark its name. Some call it the Church of All Corners, within the wall. Those who have entered describe it as something unanchored, shifting, as though it exists outside of our time. The best account we have of this mysterious church comes from a 19th century document. It was an addendum to a survey of city churches conducted after the Union of Benefices Act 1860, which led to the demolition of several churches due to declining congregations. This document, written by a London corporation clerk, describes the plaque that shouldn't exist. The clerk wrote that one evening he came across a church that seemed unfamiliar. He was tired and initially thought his fatigue was playing tricks on him. The church's walls were solemn and solid like something Wren might have built. But they felt wrong, bleak and unsettling. Inside, the darkness felt almost alive, untouched by the light from the high windows or a tear in the roof. The pews were scattered and broken, and the pulpit was gone. The clerk described feeling panicked and disorientated. The more he tried to leave, the more the building seemed to change around him, twisting and turning until it felt like the church itself was trying to throw him out. When he finally did stumble out, he found himself far from where he had entered, at the very edge of the city. The clerk, of course, reported it, and the corporation, of course, ignored it, and it remained forgotten for another 150 years until a city tour guide named Graham Herod found it. Herod, who called himself London's first portologist, had collected several accounts of the lost church. His research revealed a series of strange sightings: church bells heard at odd times, glimpses of towers down long-forgotten alleyways, and shifts in the landscape of the city. Herod described this as temporary untethered. Of course, here we describe these as just another temporal anomaly, maybe something that's trapped within two different pocket dimensions, or some sort of interdimensional portal where an element of a location isn't quite in the same time and space as the rest of the present time. Anyway, a building lost in time, drifting through history. It's as though it's constantly trying to reassert itself into the fabric of the city, struggling to remain relevant as the world changes around it. Perhaps it was the Great Fire, the Blitz, or a constant demolition and repurposing of sacred places that caused this dislocation. When churches were rebuilt, bombed and scattered, pulpits moved, spires relocated, entire churches shipped overseas. All corners within the wall may have been a casualty of this turmoil, something that couldn't handle being torn apart and forgotten. Imagine centuries of shifting landscapes, fires, bombings, demolitions, and even redevelopment projects that tore the very foundations of these sacred places. It's easy to picture the turmoil left behind. Perhaps all corners within the wall was torn from its place, its essence fractured, leaving behind a shell that refused to disappear entirely. Some believe that each piece of a dismantled church, each stone and beam carries a fragment of its original purpose, and when scattered, they yearn to reunite, to become whole again. Maybe that's what makes all corners so unstable, like a phantom structure pieced together from forgotten fragments, drifting through time, trying to belong somewhere. And maybe that's why it makes it so dangerous. Its desperation, its relentless attempts to claim those who enter, as if seeking to complete itself. Its dislocation and instability could explain why many reports hear the echoes of long-lost bells tolling at impossible hours, or seeing towers where none should exist. Where does it say this? Oh yes, here we go. Disappearing the moment you look away. It's as if the church is trying to remind the city it once stood proudly within its bounds to make itself seen, even if only for a fleeting, unsettling moment. There are even more unsettling accounts, and some are truly chilling. I've got one here from the late 1990s. It was at an anti-global capitalism protest. Interesting. A group of activists claimed they had stumbled into all corners while following the route of the buried river Walbrook. They discovered their experience in detail, and their testimony is deeply unnerving.
Afternoon, Felix. Just letting you know we've got a code amber, level -2.
Right, okay.
It's being dealt with, so nothing to worry about.
Lovely, Jeff. Thank you very much. Okay. They said the air changed as soon as they entered, becoming unnaturally cold, and the space inside seemed to breathe a slow, almost rhythmic Sorry about this. Can somebody turn... Can somebody turn it down? The walls seemed to pulse, expanding and contracting, and their footsteps echoed strangely, as if swallowed by the darkness before bouncing back at them in different directions. Sarah, one of the archivists, had heard faint whispers, twisted murmurs that seemed to echo in a language he couldn't understand. He described the whispers as prayers that had been corrupted, the words backwards and malformed. The deeper they went, the louder the whispers became, until they drowned out everything else, a deafening roar that made it impossible to think. He said it felt like the church was shifting, the walls changing, leading them in circles, trapping them inside. I guess it kind of reminds me of them Harry Potter staircases. When they finally burst through the door and escaped, Sarah was silent, her face drained of colour, her eyes wide with terror. She refused to speak about what she saw in the darkness. The others described catching glimpses of something moving in the shadows, a figure impossibly tall with limbs so long they could scrape the ceiling. Though they couldn't make out its face, they felt its gaze, cold and malevolent, filled with hatred that seemed to seep into their very bones. It was as if the church had conjured something to expel them, something ancient and angry, determined to keep its secrets hidden. In the weeks after, though, strange things began to happen. Alex woke in the middle of the night to the sound of the church bells, though no churches were nearby. Another archivist found strange symbols etched into the walls of his flat, symbols like they'd seen inside all corners. And Sarah began sleepwalking, always waking up at the front door, her hand on the latch, as if something was calling her. Wonder if it was a siren or something. I should do some more research into this. And there's more. In January 2024... Oh. January 2024. Yes. I remember Michael working on this case. He had mentioned something had been found recently. A homeless man named Peter was found wandering near the edge of the city, disorientated and terrified. He had taken shelter in an old church. He hadn't been there before. It was late and he needed a place to sleep to escape the cold. He saw the faint silhouette in the church with the doors slightly open and decided to enter. Inside it was dark and oppressive. The silence felt heavy, almost alive. Strange carvings covered the walls, symbols that seemed to shift when he looked directly at them. Yes, here we go. He heard a soft crying. This is new. But whenever he tried to find the source, the sound moved, echoing from different corners. He tried to leave, but every door led him deeper into the darkness. This is interesting. Peter saw a figure, so Peter must be the homeless man. A tall, shadowy shape that moved just out of sight, always at the edge of his vision. He felt it watching, a cold gaze piercing through him. He collapsed, his vision blurred as the shadow loomed closer, whispering the words he couldn't understand. He woke, and he was lying miles away from where he'd entered. His clothes were damp and covered in frost. His hands were covered in soot. Etched in the grime were faint symbols, the same ones from the church. Well, so he said. Obviously, we haven't got any actual evidence of what these symbols were, but... Okay, yeah, so Peter's stories matches the others. The disorientation, the strange symbols, the overwhelming dread. The church, it's as if the church doesn't just trap those who enter, but leaves a mark, a reminder that it exists, always waiting. Well, the Church of All Corners within the wall is classified as a Class 6 full-form manifestation. So what that means is it's a structure that appears physically, with a constant yet shifting form, aware of those who enter, capable of subtle, unsettling interactions. It's not just a place. We believe this would be an entity, a haunting of stone and mortar. And if you find yourself before the church that isn't marked and doesn't quite feel right, perhaps simply walk away. Yeah, well, the archive is full of stories like this, places, objects, and moments in time that refuse to fade away quietly. They linger for someone to stumble upon them, someone curious enough to lift the veil. As much as I try to categorize and document them, there's always something that slips through, something that refuses to be pinned down. Anyway, I leave you with this thought. Sometimes the past reaches out, not with nostalgia, but with claws that seek to hold us. The next time you pass an old forgotten corner of London, remember, all corners within the wall. It might just be waiting for someone who isn't careful enough, someone who lingers in a moment too long. So tread lightly and keep your wits about you. The city has secrets it prefers to keep. Well, this is me, Felix, logging off for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and sorry about that little interruption. I think whatever's been going on down there is now being hopefully fixed and sorted, and I'll see you again tomorrow.